Today, we are discussing equity, diversity, and inclusion.
In every interaction you have, you're like, how can I be of service?
Manpreet is a leader who brings over 2 decades of experience.
I was born and raised in Kamloops, and my parents are amazing, blue collar. A lot of my research and my work has always been about how are people motivated and satisfied in the workplace? How do we support them to thrive?
For every dollar a male earns, it's about...
I hate using the word imposter syndrome because I feel like the systems make us think that we can't do it.
How do you define EDI?
When we think about equity, we have to think about how are the systems built that are going to be fair and equal for everyone to succeed in. But my focus is on inclusion, where people feel like they belong and are accepted.
Your work at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons.
They're trying to end chemical warfare in the world. 98% of the stockpiles of chemical weapons are all gone at this point because of the work.
We're involved in this space in making improvement for women of marginalized communities.
Because my grandmother, she actually was in Punjab, and they do this in villages in Africa too, where the women get together. With UN Women Georgia, there was a consulting contract to develop a mentorship program within the country of Georgia.
She was a board of governor at Royal Roads University.
I am someone who just wants to create connection in the world. I've been to 47 countries actually, and I'd love to go learn about cultures.
She was listed as number 15 on the Empower 100 Ethnic Minority Future Leaders list in 2020.
We started a networking group for South Asian women, myself and Suki Kuman. And we had 85 women show up to the first event.
Women in leadership positions. What is your advice?
Men are on a 24-hour cycle. Women are on a month cycle. Our workplaces are made for men, not for women.
What are some of the challenges in advancing EDI?
What that means is that people can feel like they can speak up, they can voice their opinion, and know that they're going to be heard. I started VEZA 6 years ago. We were still having the conversation of why this is important.
Sounds like Canada has some...
There's 400 resources available, open source, and anyone can go on to there and implement DEI into the workplace. My body stopped functioning the way I needed it to function. My brother passed away.
You guys got some indigenous artifacts.
We did an Israeli Bhangra dance. And we used to do this event called Repercussion, where we bring Kathak and Irish and flamenco together. I think the message is just that we're more the same than we are different. And if we remember that, the world will be a better place.
Sat Shri Akal, Namaste, hello and welcome to the Truth Tribe Show. I'm your host Ravi Toor, and today we are discussing equity, diversity, and inclusion, along with entrepreneurship, leadership, and women empowerment with a very special guest from VEZA Global, Manpreet Dhillon. Manpreet, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
It's an honor to have you, and I'm super excited for our conversation as well. So who is Manpreet? Manpreet is a leader who brings over 2 decades of experience in advising, coaching, and guiding initiatives around human resources, equity, diversity, and inclusion. She's the founder of VEZA Global, a firm dedicated to promoting equality for individuals from culturally diverse backgrounds through holistic leadership and entrepreneurial empowerment. Manpreet is an expert in EDI assessments, inclusive leadership coaching, organizational culture, change management, strategic planning, business development. Her commitment to global diversity has led her to impactful roles, including working with United Nations Women as a consultant for the Mentorship Program for Women. She was also part for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Her leadership extends into her roles as a board member for the Canada-India Education Society and the BCIT Alumni Association, and as a board of governor at Royal Roads University. She also served as the chair of the board of directors for the Vancouver International Bhangra Celebration Society. Recognized globally for her impact, she was listed as number 15 on the Empower 100 Ethnic Minority Future Leaders list in 2020, and she's a nominee for the RBC Women Entrepreneur of the Year and a finalist in BC Business for Good in Thought Leadership. A true globetrotter, she's also a travel enthusiast who has visited 44 countries and counting. Looking forward to our conversation, Manpreet. To start us off, though, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
After listening to the bio, I'm like, oh yeah, forgot that's all part of me, who I am as well. I think for me, one of the biggest things is like who I am is someone who just wants to create connection in the world. I really want to foster impact. For me, I'm really quirky and I love dad jokes. And I think that's what most people know me as because I constantly get dad jokes on Instagram from everyone. And the people know me as someone who travels a lot. Obviously, I've been to, now it's 47 countries actually. And
Oh, wow.
I love to go learn about cultures and experiences and have different types of experiences in the different places of the world. And I think the other thing for me, at the end of the day, for me, I feel like who I am is just, I want to be kind. And I hope that's how I show up in the world. and I want to be caring, and I want to be, how do I be of service to others? And that's how I focus on who I am. And when I go back into inwards with myself.
That's lovely. That quote comes to my mind. It's cliche, but it's if you can choose to be anything in this world, be kind. So
Yeah.
what you said there like really resonates with that. And love the travel part as well. We are going to touch on that later in our conversation as well. One question that I start most of my conversation with is, how do you define success? So in your world, how do you do that? And who do you consider successful?
Success now is very different than what it was when I was a child. So when I remember distinctly when I was 18, I thought success was being on the phone at all hours, solving problems and having a lot of people reporting to you. And once I achieved that, I realized that was not success. Success now is, how do you find happiness and be present with the people you love and foster really positive relationships? At the end of the day, when you're making impact in your daily routine and how you show up in every perspective, that's what success is. When you're in every interaction you have, you're like, how can I be of service? That's what success is. And also just having the health and the well-being to support that. For me, that's successful now. And having fun and just choosing to be happy. I've been reading this really great book, The Untethered Soul, and it was reminding me that we just get to choose to be happy. And that's our success, is once you choose to be happy, everything lines up for you to be happy. And then you're successful. And so.
Yeah. 100%. As I say, happiness is a choice. So that book that you mentioned, who is the author on that book and what was the name of the book again?
Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Michael Singer. Awesome. Yeah. And who do you consider as your role models or inspirations or people that you consider successful?
I still do, my maternal grandfather. He helped a lot of people in the world. He would constantly be of service to people, and he never got into politics, but he had a lot of political pull. And that was someone I just really admired. Like when he passed away at this point over 30 years ago. People still know who he is and still talk about him and the impact that he made on their lives. And that's how, for me, that was success. He never had the titles. He never had the money or anything. He just went and was of service. I also find my mom and my grandmother are role models, because my grandmother, she actually was in the Punjab, and they do this in villages in Africa too, where the women get together and they have a common money pot that they use to help women to get out of problems or help buy stuff at the house and stuff. So my grandmother used to run that in her village, and she used to be in charge of that. And she helped a lot of women that way too. And then my mom, she went into entrepreneurship when she was really quite young. And then and with the support of my dad, and my dad's always been very much about equal rights and supporting. And so she was in entrepreneurship, and she went back to school at age 45 and got her diploma because she really wanted to achieve that. And so with that, it's in having my dad support her has been really great role models for me to show like how we need to support one another, what it means to put your goals ahead of what you need and actually follow them through, and what that looks like with the support of others and actually asking for what you need as well. So it's been really powerful experience with all four of them, actually, to have them in my life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Sounds like leadership runs in your family and in the genes. Manpreet, how I want to do this session today is track down your career path to the current state. So we'll go back in time, we'll track your career to where we are today, and then continue the conversation on. So where I want to go with this is your academic journey. You did business administration, and correct me if I'm wrong, from TRU, that's Thompson River University. And then you went for your master's in Phoenix University for organizational management. Can you walk me through those days as to what sparked your interest in business administration and what led to the move to the Phoenix University?
So I'll have to start before that, because I actually started off in kinesiology because I wanted to actually be an athletic trainer for Team Canada Women. And I live with multiple concussions. So sciences and my brain don't really coincide. I can't think like that anymore. So then I did 1 year of sciences, when it went into electronic engineering, and learned how systems work and how I learned how to create power supply boxes, which is really fun. And then I decided to go into management systems at VCIT. So I finished my diploma in VCIT in management systems, which is all about consulting and looking at organizations as a system. So everything supported each other, even there were very distinct fields. And then that's when I decided actually I wanted to be a consultant. I was back at VCIT. Finished my degree at Thompson Rivers University. And I didn't actually still want to be in HR. So I tried to get back into sciences, realized my brain, me and chemistry just don't align. So I was like, okay, what are other ways I can help people walk in the world? because that was like part of my motivation. I had decided that quite young when I was like 5 years old. That's what I wanted to do. And so I decided to get into coaching and it just ended up in HR. And so now a lot of my research and my work has always been about how are people motivated and satisfied in the workplace and how do we support them to thrive? And didn't realize that was the field of diversity and inclusion in many ways, because the work that I was doing was looking at cultural competency. And as I started to do that further and further, started coaching women of color in leadership, knew in between before that, I knew I needed a master's because I just, for myself, I always wanted to, and I still want to get my PhD at some point. But I have a certificate in project management, certificate in like knowledge management transfer, internal auditing. I'm working on my cybersecurity right now just for fun, and product management. Because all those stuff, like I love education, because every time I do something, it actually makes me think about the world differently. And it actually helps me with whatever work I'm doing at that time. And that's actually why all of that work that I did and the different ways of thinking has allowed me to have VEZA be the company that it has. And so that doesn't answer your question, but anyways, it was like the long-winded version of like how my journey was all over the place, but it ended up to where I am today.
It sure does. So just a question on that, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here. You mentioned that you were involved in this space in making improvement for women of marginalized communities or colored women, even before you knew about EDI as a field. What sort of sparked your interest in that, or how did you come to the conclusion that this is what you want to do?
Yeah, so it actually started with when I was a part of BIBC, the Vancouver International Bhangra Celebration. One of the things that we used to do was bring different culture communities together. We did an Israeli Bhangra dance and really looking at how similar the cultures were and how different they are. And then we actually use that towards a dance. And we used to do this event called Repercussion, where we would bring Gaelic and Irish and flamenco together and show how similar the footwork was. And for me, that started my interest. And I was like, if we focus on bringing people's cultures forward, what does that look like? So I started doing cultural days at UBC. In our department, we would have these like, teach us about your culture. And then this amazing thing happened one day. One of our colleagues, she was Korean, she was teaching us about like how it was to work in Korea. And as she was talking about it, she goes, well, in Korea, like it's a hierarchy. We don't always talk ahead, talk at the table or unless we're asked to. And all of a sudden her colleagues are like, oh, is that why you don't speak up? And she's, yeah, because she's like, still influences me. And then all of a sudden it started to transcend upon like her whole experience in work changed because people started asking her the question. And that's when I was like, okay, there's something here about cultural competency. Didn't really know what that was still. And then with the women of color, like what happened was I was fortunate enough, we started a networking group for South Asian women, myself and Suki Guman. And we had 85 women show up to the first event.
Wow.
And then I started doing all these, like, I did this roundtable for multicultural advisory at BC with BC Business. And it was like bringing we brought 30 women from different backgrounds to get together to talk about like ethnic background, to talk about the glass ceiling. And all of them had the same thing, was the lack of mentorship, the lack of support, lack of representation, the imposter syndrome, how that is, and how the systems don't work for them. And when I was fortunate enough to serve on some provincial committees around advising on women within BC, and as we were talking about this, I kept bringing the conversation forward about women of color. And they're like, no, it's a women's conversation right now. We don't need to focus on women of color. We need to focus on women. I'm like, no, there's another layer here that we're missing because our challenges are different than the ones of just women, like white women in general. That was back in 2011. And it literally wasn't until 2020 when people are just like, oh yeah, okay, that's right. Women of color do have different challenges, even though this work has been being done since 1960. And as I was like researching how do I support women of color, I started to realize that diversity and inclusion was a field that's been around since the 1960s to look at how Black women are supported within the workplace. And that's actually when I was like, oh, this is what I do. I didn't realize that's actually the work I did. I just fell into it. But I've been actually doing it since 2005 at this point. So it was really neat to be able to be like, oh, there's a reason why I'm doing this work. And it's not something obscure and no one knows about it. It's actually a whole field.
Yeah, so. Very interesting. And I'm going to tap into that gender inequality, especially in the workplace later in our session today. But just coming back to, so from you did your master's in Phoenix University, then you spent a considerable amount of time in UBC. And I believe you have multiple roles, but it was more focused on HR, operations and communications. How did that transition came about? What was your role in UBC? Can you give me a little bit of rundown of those days?
Yeah, I was really fortunate that I had really great managers. So I started off as department secretary, and I started there because people are always like, oh, I need to get the manager role right away. And the best thing I did was have an administrative assistant role because I had learned the department secretary role allowed me to understand how the organization worked. And then I was there for 3 years, and I moved into a coordinator for a business manager for clinical epidemiology unit and set up some of their systems. And then when I moved into my role as a senior manager, my manager was excellent. She really provided me a lot of, she championed me, provided me a lot of resources and tools and education to allow me to do this role. And so I helped to merge the departments. So we went from a unit of, I think, 24 to a unit of 70 in total. And so I merged the departments. I got to lead that merger. I developed oversee our finances too. So we had a $10 million budget that we did. But it was really interesting because my background has always been in organizational management. So of course I was in a role that was like running the organization. And it was really supporting the director at a very like operational level. So it's been funny because I didn't realize that's what my strength was, because I see how organizations are done. I can see how organizations run well. And that's actually what my diploma was in and everything else was in. My master's was looking at the system, looking at all aspects of the organization and how do we optimize it. And that's actually what my role was at UBC as well.
Very interesting. Your focus is, as we talked about, equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's not a new field, but there's definitely way more focus, I would say, over the last decade. How do you define EDI for others who have no clue what that is?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is when we think about equity, we have to think about how are the systems built that are going to be fair and equal for everyone to succeed in. And that's how we think about equity. And then the diversity, I always look at from my diversity of thought perspective. How are we not looking at people's race, like what's in the external, but we're looking at what are the different perspectives and the lens that they bring in. Even thinking about socioeconomic status, thinking about education status and everything, that's all about diversity as well. And then when we're thinking about, my focus is on inclusion. There's other people who focus on social justice, but my focus is on inclusion, where people feel like they belong and are accepted with where in the community, in the organization that they're at. And what that means is that people can feel like they can speak up, they can have their voice heard, they can voice their opinion and know that they're going to be heard and not dismissed or not negated in any which way. And that's actually what my focus is around inclusion as well. A lot of my work is about how do we bring people together to understand how do we have everyone be in their strengths? Because we have so many strengths, and we sometimes, if we stereotype people, we're right away letting go of their strengths. We're not even thinking about their strengths. So if we think about inclusion, we're focused on how do we actually focus on their strengths? How do we help them thrive? Then all of a sudden we're going to have thriving communities and societies as well.
Very interesting. And in your experience, because you've been in this space for such a long time, how has this topic of conversation evolved over the last, let's say, decade or 2 decades?
So when I started VEZA 6 years ago. I'm laughing because it's been interesting. When we started, we were still having the conversation of why this is important. And then obviously that changed in 2020 with George Floyd's murder and the Indigenous graves being found. So the conversation changed, thank goodness. And people were actually like, okay, this means something. And people were voicing up and things like that. But we're actually going back to the place of like, why does this matter? And it's been, before that, it was a lot more focused on cultural and like being focused on the multicultural language was still being used and being that was okay, but not thinking about all the other identities that people have. And now at least we're very conscious about all the other identities. But the polarization that's happening right now in in North America, actually, mostly, but it's still happening in Europe too. Europe is a little bit different. The polarization is based on the fact that people understand that we're all so different, but they don't want to act different. They don't want to change anything. So it's been an interesting, because like, there's the acknowledgements there, the awareness is there, the education's there now. But do people want to do it? I think it's actually diminished in many ways. There's a polarization of it in many ways.
Interesting. So you mentioned other identities instead of multicultural. Do you want to just clarify for the listeners of what you referred to?
Yeah, sure. Because we look at race, so gender is one of the ones that most people talk about when they talk about equity, diversity, inclusion. So gender, and then disabilities as well. And socioeconomic status is coming up. We look at caste. It's something we look at in India, but then obviously it's starting to be looked at out here as well in different ways, in terms of socioeconomic status as well. Those are the major ones. And then then some people will start to bring in other identities as well, just making sure that they're covered off. But those are the major ones that we look at.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because it just like paints the picture for everybody who's listening. From there, I want to go to your work at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. It just sounds a really cool organization. I believe that they were set up in Netherlands, and I think you worked there as HR strategy, analytics officer, consultant, senior advisor in EDI. Can you walk me through what that organization was and what was your role within it?
Yeah, it's amazing because they're trying to end chemical warfare in the world. And they actually just got rid of 98% of the stockpiles of chemical weapons are all gone at this point because of the work of this organization. I was introduced to the organization in 2017. I went as a UN volunteer. I had always wanted to work in the UN. And I got the opportunity to go in as a UN volunteer. So I did some strategy work for them at that point. Went to Netherlands for 4 months. And when I came back, I still consulted with them online for leadership competency and different other types of work. But my heart was still there because the work is so meaningful because you're doing some international work. When I was sitting there in 2017, the Syria report had just come out, and we were in the building when the report came out, when it was all over the media, and the discussions were happening, and I was in the building, and I was like, oh wow, this is really international. Something really big is happening here. And you realize that you're like, I'm just a small part in this whole world, and whatever I can do to make this world better, it's great. It's excellent. And so that was like with my turning point of I'm so hooked on like international work. And then 2021, I decided to go back again and took the HR policy and strategy role. But the equity, diversity, inclusion work is where my specialty is. So they really needed someone in a senior advisor role for that. So I moved into that role. So I just finished that role at the end of December. And the work there is we were launching a gender equality roadmap and people strategy, but we have 198 countries who are state parties. Everyone has different legislation around a lot of these topics around gender, LGBTQIA as well. And what that looks like is very different from an international context. And even though the organization is very multicultural, the UN is like, they're still looking at ways of how to bring the diversity conversation in, even though they have the multiculturalism there, but they don't really always talk about race. It was really such an inspirational time to be there because I think 140 countries, or I don't know how many countries we had working at the organization at that point. So all these, you're constantly hearing different languages, you're constantly different perspectives, it's like such a fulfilling experience because I realized how limited my world was. And here I thought was very worldly. And when I was there, I was like, oh, wow, I'm missing out on a lot of understanding of the world at this point. And it also made me realize I was like, I'm just such a different person because who my friends were very different. Here in Canada, all my friends are Canadian born, mostly Canadian born, speak English first or speak English fluently. Had lived middle class, like certain education backgrounds. I was like, wow, here I'm like doing this work and I'm like, I'm very homogenized about who I'm actually friends with. There, my friends were from like Spain, Syria, Italy, and Bulgaria, Slovenia. Like it was just like in different experiences and you're learning about the different cultures and everyone, English was like, some of them was like their 8th language, 12th language. And you're like, oh, okay, this is, and then they're all adjusting to me to speak English because that's what everyone has to learn. English is still the common language, which is changing. But, I was like, and they're trying to express themselves fully. And I'm like, how do I only know 3 languages? What I need to learn more because they're trying so hard. So yeah, it was such an amazing experience. And then the organization, it's a UN entity and they are really trying to do what they can to make this world a better place, which is amazing. So.
You mentioned United Nations, and you said that from a very young age, you wanted to partake in UN and be involved with them, which you were. You also were a part of UN program for women, a mentorship program for women.
Yeah.
Can you first tell me why you wanted to be involved with UN, and B, how was that mentorship program for women?
Sure. I guess I was 18 when I decided I wanted to work for the UN. I always wanted to volunteer internationally. I wanted to do work internationally because I feel like there's so many people that need it more than we're so privileged in Canada. And so there's so many other people who need the work. And I feel like with the UN, you could do a lot more and you have the name behind you, the resources and the support so you can actually do it. And so when I went into OPCW, because I worked at one organization, you start to get more leverage into working with others. So with UN Women Georgia, there was a consulting contract to develop a mentorship program for the private sector within the UN, within the country of Georgia. And that's what we did. Actually, it's online, and it's one of my works that I'm most proud of, because it's a whole mentorship guide on how to start up mentorship program with the tools and the resources and the emails and everything that you need, so you can get mentorship going, so you don't have that as an excuse. And so it's about how to even have mentoring conversations and how to mentor other people to help them in their work and their career. And it was a small project. It was like 4 months, but the impact of that mentorship guide has been shared with private organizations in the country, Georgia. I've shared it out with many different people around the world. And I know that people have used it to set up their mentoring program. So the impact was really cool to see, and how impactful that was. It was interesting because I was remote, so I never got to go to Georgia. And so I didn't even know, I had to research everything about the country online to see what the cultural nuances would be, which was another aspect. I was like, oh, that got me really curious, but I had to learn everything from here. So, which is always interesting when you're trying to work on something that way.
Yeah, 100%. So question on that. You are a woman yourself. You've worked as a mentor for these women through the United Nations. If you have to list a couple of challenges that women face today on a global scale, what would be on that list?
Lack of access, not knowing about opportunities and not knowing how to get them or how to be a part of that conversation, not being a part of the conversation. A lot of the conversations that have a lot of decision making are usually dominated by men. And women are there as assistant roles, if they're in the room at all, and not having a space at the table. Not knowing what else is out there, what else is possible. And then also when there's lack of representation, you haven't seen someone else do it, you don't know if it's possible for you. So I think some of that kind of shows up as challenges off the top of my head.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to ask you some of the things that we can do to improve that as well now. What would those be?
I think the biggest thing is that we have to champion people. One of the biggest, I'm so fortunate that I have some great champions in my life who will invite me to meetings. They invite me onto projects. They will introduce me to people that I would never have access to otherwise. And that's why a lot of the work that I get to do, that it's not even written publicly, I get to do because of these individuals. And it's really amazing because it has the wealth of experience and the richness of the knowledge and the contacts that I have through this champions has been life-changing. And I think that's what we need to do, is open the doors for other people. If you're going to an event, invite someone along with you that wasn't going to get access. If you're going to a meeting, invite someone with you that could be possibly helpful in the project or provide a different perspective. Those are simple things that we can do. When you have a job opportunity, send it to someone that you know and make the introduction. And the biggest thing is when we're not going to get anywhere alone, when we're in decision-making rooms or we're part of decisions, ask other people for their opinion. And we can't change things overnight on who's inside those rooms. They're there for a reason. But ask who the end user is and ask them for their opinion. That's actually how we're going to make change happen. Just for those three things will make a world of a difference for everyone.
Yeah, 100%. And I love what you said there. You cannot win alone. And I can speak to one of my most recent experiences not that long ago. I went to this event and I had no business being there, but I was invited by somebody who was organizing the event. And I'm so thankful that I did go to the event, because it opened a door of opportunities for me and I was able to connect with so many like-minded people. So I can completely validate what you just said there, is giving others the opportunity as well, because somebody gave it to you.
Yeah, it makes such a difference. That's the whole thing. It's about giving each other opportunities. And it feels so good, right? When you give people opportunities and they're it just makes someone else's life better.
So let's move on to your current focus right now. So you started VEZA Global. Why did you start this organization? What gaps are you trying to fill within the industry?
VEZA was created actually to fill the gap of looking at women of color in leadership. And one of the things is because I had a coaching company before and I've been coaching for some time. I had a consulting company, but I knew that the work was bigger than me. And I knew that whatever work we're going to do is going to be much bigger than I am. So I created VEZA. VEZA it means connection and Croatian and Serbian. And I started off with wanting the name of Sanskrit in connection, but it just wasn't marketable at the time. So chose VEZA, but it was actually really powerful because why I chose VEZA, because it ended up leading me to a whole nother journey that I wouldn't have thought about otherwise. But we started off with the company. The work was in coaching first. Then we did a trade mission of women entrepreneurs to Croatia. Even our dolphin logo at that time looked like the dolphins from the Adriatic Sea. And then we started to work with a provincial project with the TAP network. We created a hub for the tech industry here. diversity inclusion resources. And from that, we created an assessment tool, an audit process. We audited over 36 tech companies out of that project. And now we've worked with over 75 companies in general. Oh. And we were doing a lot of advisory and training as well. We still continue to do the coaching, but the coaching became really minimal. And so then at the time when I created it, this is 2017. So we were focusing on women of color. So it was really hard to actually get clients at the beginning. We were fortunate that we got the government contracts, but it was also really interesting because of the fact we had the women of color angle. And that's what people were really interested in. They didn't want to spend money on it, but they were interested in it. But we had a lot of women who were interested in it. That changed. And now we do like more audits and we focus on assessments and we do develop programs and courses. It's more than training, right? It's more, there's a more comprehensive, there's like toolkits that are needed. There's the policy review, the document review. That's what we're trying to do. The focus, and there's so many different companies who are doing this, but our focus is really like we focus on gender and race. We have the global perspective. So we work with a lot of organizations that have offices in Canada, US, England, in Europe in general, and in India as well. And so we get that perspective in. So we have the global part then. And also our work really focuses on the inclusion piece. So we don't focus just on anti-racism. We focus on how do we create inclusive culture. And that's really our focus. So that's why organizations choose to work with us, is for those reasons. If they're wanting to be on the other end of the spectrum of like social justice, anti-racism, there's other firms that are doing that work and they're doing amazing work in that as well.
Very interesting, because that was one of the questions I had is who do you work with? And you already mentioned some global companies with networks in North America and around the globe as well. What does the breakdown of the organization looks like? Who all are involved? Where do you all work out of? Because I know last I was speaking with you, you were in Netherlands. I know you were in Vancouver today. So you travel quite a bit due to your work. Do you want to give me a little bit of rundown of that?
Yeah, so our team, so some team members are here in Vancouver, like the marketing's here. We have a couple of marketing team members here. And then we have admin support in Kenya. And then we have some other contractors from around the world that we check in with, like from Sweden. We have a couple of contractors in Europe as well, in the Netherlands. And a lot of our client in England as well, actually. And so our team, like at any one point, usually we go from 3 to 12, like it fluctuates depending on what the project is. But I try to keep it around 6 because that's, for me, it works well. And with the way the projects and things like that work. And yeah, we end up working with projects like this month. I'm going to be going to Paris and I'm going to Netherlands because we have client work out there. So it's fun to be able to go do that as well.
Sure. Sounds like fun. And you get to go visit these cool countries as well. Manpreet, so in your experience, what are some of the challenges that you face or an organization like yourself faces in advancing EDI initiatives with some of these clients that you work with?
So from the personal side, people will be like, oh, you're doing this work because you're brown and you're a woman. I was like, no, I'm doing this work because I like to see how organizations run well. And if you have a good running organization, you're going to be inclusive. And so it's been really interesting to have that lens where people only want to hire you because your skin color or because you're women. And I get challenged by that all the time. It actually makes me really frustrated, actually, because I'm like, no, I have a lot of other skills that why you should be hiring me, not because of my skin color. And I think the other challenges is that with the economy right now, people are like, the budgets are less. This is one of the first areas to go. People didn't want to spend money on it. And also people are like, we've already got the training. What does this mean now? And when you embed this work into the way workflow processes and stuff, it needs to be a more integrative approach. And you need to have consultants that are inside talking on a regular basis to managers and to team members on how to integrate these principles into their work and how to embed it. And what does that look like, from who's on the project teams to what are the systems and processes? And so the work has shifted because of that. And the challenge is because we can't get organizations to understand that yet. And then also with the ESG, the environmental social governance metrics coming out, DEI is a part of that metrics. And there's other countries are adopting that's like legally they had to report on these metrics. And we're going to be in North America, in Canada, more likely we're going to get there sooner than the US. And so people don't understand this is business imperative to understand this and how your business operates with this work. And we just can't get people to understand that yet. People think that it's like touchy-feely, it's all about feeling good. It's actually about systems and processes. It's about your policies and how everything's done. That's what this work is about. And the change management that goes along with it, that's what we need to be focusing on. Yes, there's a behavior change associated with it, definitely. But it's about how are those systems and processes set up to be equitable? And then how do you create inclusion on top of that? And that's where I think the challenge is getting people to understand that.
Interesting. So you work globally with a lot of different countries and a lot of organizations within these countries. If you have to rate the country that's leading the chart when it comes to EDI initiatives, which country would that be?
It depends on what area you look at, because gender-wise, we're quite behind in Canada. Like, thinking about Canada, like the Scandinavian countries are really in front of that. Disability legislation, like Netherlands is doing some really great work and about how they're legislating around disabilities, accessibility within the workplace, and making sure that people with disabilities are getting hired. Obviously, Indigenous rights, Australia is doing some great work, New Zealand, Canada as well. When you look at LGBTQI plus rights, that some of the European countries are a little bit progressive on that. It's not really legislation, it's just a part of the culture. So it really goes back to looking at that. And then from an ageism perspective, it's interesting because there's some of the countries, like European countries, are a little bit better on making sure like youth are included or older individuals are, that they don't have, the older individuals aren't as included, where in Canada and North America, we focus on them. So it really depends on which country.
Interesting. Sounds like Canada has some slack to pick up.
Canada's, but on a, like from a functional level, from an organizational level, we're way ahead. We're about 10 years ahead of the work in the conversation. But when you look at the particular groups, then it's a little bit like there's opportunities. But from like how to have inclusive organizations, we're so far ahead. Yeah, which is really...
So how do you measure the success of these initiatives? What metrics do you have? How do you know that you are on the right path?
For us, so when we do start off with the organization, we do a benchmark inclusion survey. And then we even with the audit report. And a lot of the time is because this work takes so long to implement and the progression is going to be slow. We do rely on the engagement surveys and we rely on the inclusion surveys in order to see improvement. When we have the focus groups, the feedback from that is really important to us because that will gauge if people are aligned or not. We look at response rates of assessments and focus groups and how many people engage in both of those as a way of if that's successful or not, if that project was successful. So those are some of the ways that we're looking at it. Long term, we don't have control over that. It's really based on how the organization implements. And so that really will depend on like what how their employees perceive the culture to be in the long term, which is what we're trying to change.
And if you have to share a success story with one of the clients that you've worked with and how you were able to turn things around in their organization, do you have any such that comes to mind?
There's been a few. It's hard to say because it's a long-term project. And a lot of these companies, they started doing it in 2020. And so they've had ebbs and flows. Some things went well, some things didn't. I think progress-wise, there's this one construction group that we work with. They were engineering firms, right? And there was such great conversation that started from this, and that was a success. There was conversation around gender equity, promotions, policies around how to support women in the field, especially working with suppliers. And if the suppliers weren't being inclusive and they were harassing or what that might look like and not creating a safe environment, what role the organization would play to support their employees. So that was really powerful to be able to facilitate those conversations. They started off with having this women's network, but then they really looked at the intersectionality of women, like women with disabilities and women who are parents, women who are single, and what does that mean in the workplace and how that changes. And they actually changed their policies to reflect that as well. So that was really cool. And I think so. And then one of the other projects that there's two other projects that I'm really proud of. One was we created a career development program with the Immigrant Employers Council of BC. So any skilled immigrants that was coming into the country, they would have access to this program so that they would get the job that's in their field. And that was really neat to have a coaching perspective, like in really working on what would it take for skilled immigrants to get the jobs that they deserve within the country. And that program has gone country nationwide, and a lot of people have taken it, and it's been amazing to be part of that. It's gone to win awards. This is like a new rendition of it, but we created the first version. And then the other project that I'm really proud of is we created the Diversity Inclusion Hub for the tech industry. There's 400 resources available, open source, and anyone can go on to there and implement DEI into the workplace, which is really neat.
You mentioned a few times gender inequality rather than equality. I was having a conversation over the last week and we were talking about this topic as well. Some of the stats that came out of there is 1 in 4 women in Canada is an immigrant woman. For every dollar a male earns, it's about 80 cents for a female. The number varies, it's 80, 84, and huge disparity. You are a female yourself, a woman who has worked in this sector for a long time. What do you see? How big is this disparity? What can women do? So we've talked about what can organizations do, but what can these women do to stand out and make sure that they know what their rights are and then stand up for that?
The biggest thing is negotiate and ask for what you're worth. I have this conversation regularly. I get roped into it too all the time because half the time I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to charge here? And I will underprice, even as a consultant, I underprice myself sometimes because I'm like, oh, I don't know if the organization has that money. And I'm like, why am I judging what the organization has? Like, why am I underpricing? Where I know if it was like a male counterpart, even a male of color, he would be charging way more than I am. And so that's one of the biggest things that for me is find out what the budget actually really is, negotiate always, also find comparables wherever you can. Share this information with one another. Like I've actually sent my consulting rates to so many other consultants. I'm like, this is what I charge because I know that I charge pretty market average. Make sure you're charging at least this, if not more. And they're like, okay, awesome. And they're like, oh no, we've been charging less. I'm like, but that's what we have to do. We have to open. We have the Pay Act coming into place, which is great about making sure that people are going to be paid equally. And there's a responsibility that organizations have to look at that. But it's also sometimes you do have to leave your job in order to make more money. And if you think about it, that's actually how sometimes if that money is a motivator, we have to think about you're not going to get that massive increase from where you're at. And it's too hard for an organization to do alignment of salaries. And I understand it's a challenging place because on one hand, we want to pay people living like minimum living wage, pay them well, all these things. But then in Canada, and especially in BC, we have a lot of small businesses that can't afford to pay people that much. And they pay as much as they can. So there's this disconnect about what's expected and what organizations can pay. And then now that's actually creating more tension between if people can get a job or not. And then they're like, I'm not being paid enough. It's like the organization is paying you as much as they can. Even as a small business, I pay above market value and I know that I do. But then I can't hire them for that many hours. And that means that the work suffers or the way that we deliver, it has to be changed. And there's a lot of things that I do, obviously as an entrepreneur, you do for free. But because there's this cultural shift as well, which I totally understand, but it's like the reality of what organizations are at as well. That's a whole nother topic.
And I love some of those points as well, right? Right where you started off is the consultancy rates. And it's not just in your profession. I'm sure in a lot of other professions, we don't know what others are charging. And we try to do like a guesstimate based on, and we always are trying to, most times we're trying to compete on price, right? So we're trying to put like the lowest bid in and making sure that we do get that contract. So having that transparency definitely helps. Right on that topic of women in leadership positions, what is your advice to them? How can women become leaders? What are some things that they can do in their day to day?
I think a lot of the conversations I have is like where people are like, I hate using the word imposter syndrome because I feel like the systems make us think that we can't do it. But it's also about the fact that the lack of representation, the lack of examples, and how do you manage it? I have a lot of conversations like that with a lot of the women that I coach. It's about the fact that they're there and they're exhausted also because they're like, I feel like I'm always pushing, I'm tired, and I'm always having to be the voice. I'm always trying to take a stand. I'm always having to prove myself. And I just want women to know that, you know what, you're not alone. You're not the only one who's going through that. There's so many other women who are going through that. And also you don't have to prove yourself because you are there because you deserve to be there. And I think that's one of the biggest things, like the exhaustion level and the burnout, especially when you get to different age groups. So we tie it into perimenopausal or menopausal. We're not talking about any of those things. With even perimenopausal, like having this conversation with friends at dinner, you're suffering brain fog, you're suffering memory loss, your decision making might be a little bit slower. But that's because your body's going through hormonal changes. But then at work, you're supposed to be fully on. And so how do you accommodate for that? And being open to being like, yeah, I need to accommodate for this differently and I need to work differently as well. And we're not having those conversations enough. And that's where a lot of women are exiting leadership positions. because the structures and the systems are made for men. Men are on a 24-hour cycle. Women are on a month cycle. Our ebbs and flows of our energy systems are based on our moon cycle. Same with men, but men are on 24 hours. Our workplaces are made for men, not for women. And so when we have women stepping into those roles, they're exhausted because they're expected to go against their natural, normal body cycles in order to perform at a certain level all the time, and which is not what our bodies and our psyches are made for. And that's why we need to change the systems, but also for these women to know that you're not alone. What you're dealing with is it's normal.
Yeah. I love that outlook. And I'll even add to that list. You mentioned menopause. I'd say even pregnancy. That's something that women go through. And a lot of times you have to be in the shoes to actually realize like what that means to their career, and depending on where they are in the career, how that's going to affect them. And it's really how many conversations are we having around them to support these women. So I love your outlook on that. We talked about some of the highlights of your career. Are there any setbacks or maybe failures in that moment that then set you up for success later? Anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, there's always is. There always is. There was times when I remember there was a time when I just cried because we weren't bringing in the sales, and I had team members that I needed to pay salaries for, and I had to let them go. And I had to revamp the way that my business was done because things were just not working the way that we wanted it to work. I built my business from bed. I was on bed rest. It's dealing with concussion recovery. And I had to hire faster than I would have liked. And the stress of trying to show up every day when I'm like in pain and suffering was really hard. But it also taught me that I had resilience. I have perseverance. Even with the team members, I still have amazing relationships with those team members. And the biggest lessons was that it's about the relationships. If I was honest with them throughout the process of what's happening, where we're at, what's going on, and I listened to what they needed, but I also listened to what the greater needs were. I also I realized I cared too much as a business owner, and that was detriment in so many ways because I wasn't focused on the numbers. And at times I wasn't as hungry to make the business happen because I'm also come from a lot of privilege. I come from a supportive family and these kind of things. So I didn't have the same hunger that sometimes immigrants have to make things happen. And it was something that I had to really learn, that I needed to find that hunger within me to want to make the change in the world, and make the change in my business and make the business what I wanted it to be. Yeah, there's always lots of setbacks, lots of learnings. But the biggest thing was like, even now we're going through a rebrand and revamping of the business. But the biggest thing is about planning and being consistent with certain things and going back to like financial numbers constantly and having that model and taking the emotion out of it and really focus on what are the numbers and what are the numbers showing. Those are the biggest lessons I've learned as well.
I love that. And just want to tap into that. So you mentioned that you had to let some employees go. We are in a turbulent economic time. It's a lot of fluctuation going on. A lot of other business owners have been in the same position. How do you have that conversation, or how do you have tough conversations like that with people that you worked with?
I think the biggest thing is like the transparency of, I foreshadowed it a little bit of, hey, this is coming down the pipeline, so they're not shocked. And also just being honest. It was emotional for me and it was emotional for them, and just having that honest conversation of, this is hard. This is not what I want. Doesn't reflect upon who you are. But this is what needs to happen because it's not feasible anymore. I bootstrapped my company, so I had to do what I need to do. And also just let yourself cry the next day right afterwards and allow yourself the emotion. It's a tough thing because I think for many of us, I created my company to create jobs. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to create jobs. And the hardest thing for me is every time I have to shift my staff or be like, the contract ends, it sucks. And I know it sucks for the other person, but then I also am like, okay, who can I introduce you to? What introductions can I make? What kind of work do you want to do? How can I be a reference, or what does that look like? There's other ways to support them. And every person who's left the organization, we're a training organization in many ways. Every person that's left has been moved into such a better opportunity. And then I'm like, this is great. At least I was able to help. And
so I guess the theme is, don't leave them high and dry at a time like that. 'Cause I've heard, and I'm sure you've had conversations where 1,000 people were let go over a Zoom call. It's not the best way to do it, let's say. I've been following your social. We covered like the exhaustion, the burnout at work. One of the things that you have been talking about on your socials, and if you're comfortable talking about, is grief. A lot of people go through that. I know you have a personal story as well. How does one deal with grief?
Yeah, grief is like, it's such an interesting, everyone's going to go through it. we are going to lose people. You're going to lose people in your life. You're going to lose your job. You might lose we're going to have our health changes. Grief is like something that I don't know why we don't talk about it enough. I do have personal stories with it. Had to like my job, my body stopped functioning the way I needed it to function. My brother passed away, and like life was not like think of it. Like life is not what I intended it to be. But the beautiful thing about grief is like there's a lot. I saw this quote years ago, but grief is love that doesn't know where to go anymore. And when you think about it from that perspective, it just shows in how big your heart is. When you're grieving, it just shows that you're able to love and care about something so much that you are missing it and you're sad, and allowing those emotions to be sad. But what that means in the workplace is sometimes your brain chemistry changes. You can't think the same way. Your decision processing it changed, and giving yourself time and space to allow that to happen. And that's the most important piece. And that's where I think one of the things with grief is like we need more space for it, and allow yourself. My brother passed away like 10 years ago. I know that on his birthday, it's a no meeting day. It's always going to be a no meeting day because I get to honor him. I get to celebrate him. I get to do whatever he wants. I also know on his death anniversary, that's one day that's always hard. I try to also do a no meeting day. I might end up traveling that day, but I won't do like meetings. And those are things that just popped into there's systems in my life now at this point. And also remembering, you can remember that person, and that doesn't mean that you're stuck in the past. The memory is all we have, but it's also about how do you honor that memory? And if other people around you, like their faces change when you're talking about that person, if it's about a person, that's okay. They're not the ones to talk to. There's other people who want to talk about it. There's other people who want to talk about that person. I know even now, people 10 years later, I'll bring up stories about my brother, and I know who I can't, because I know whose energy is going to shift and who wants to talk about it, who's going to still, and I have cousins who are still, they might be still stuck in sadness around it. But I know that they need to talk to someone about it, because you don't forget the person. You don't forget who they were to you, and you don't forget who you were to them. The whole thing about grief is you're changing your identity as well. You lost a part of your personality or part of who you were to someone, and that's what you're grieving as well. You're grieving a part of yourself. And so I think grief is like, it's a beautiful thing in many ways, because it allows us to go deep within ourselves and look at how big our heart is, what else we want in the world, what are the experiences that we really treasured, and what are the relationships that we really treasure in our life as well. It's really a really powerful
Thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for bringing us into that as well, because again, it's such a universal experience and all of us go through it, yet we don't know how to address it. And I love how you said it's about honoring that person and honoring their memories. Let's just shift gears from here and let's go into some of the incredible work that you have done. So you've been on a lot of not-for-profit organizations, some incredible work. In the spirit of time, we won't cover all of them, but maybe we can pick one of them. And let's go with the Surrey Art Gallery exhibit. You were part of that. And what I liked the most about that is you guys got some indigenous artifacts from India. Can you give me a walk down of what that project was and what were these artifacts from India that you guys got?
So I'm not going to take a lot of credit for that work. That was Jordan Strom. He's still the curator, and I got to be a guest curator for that exhibit, and I just advised, and then the rest of it was him. I made some introductions. The way that he put it together was amazing. My role in these exhibits, even with the Museum of Vancouver one, is just to advise, and there's so many people that make it happen. But it was just really cool to be a part of creating a museum exhibit. We did get artifacts from different parts of the world. Well, he did, sorry. He just had sourced them. He had talked to the artist and brought them forward. And even people locally, they contributed. Even for the Museum of Vancouver exhibit that we had, the Bhangra.me, people from Vancouver, locals just came forward and, okay, we want to contribute to this. And they would bring things from their home and be like, yeah, we want to, from the Bhangra. We told the history of South Asians through Bhangra in Vancouver. And it was just amazing to see what people wanted to contribute. And then one of the other exhibits I was a part of was the Royal BC Museum. We contributed a few items to that. And then even just going in and like seeing people like dusting it off from like their basements of like old, like their families' dishes and things like that. But these mean something. And that's why it's so important to like really honor the past, because that's actually, we learn how people they are now because we've honored the past.
So you were named number 15 on the Empower 100 Ethnic Minority Future Leaders list. What does that accomplishment mean to you?
Why I got nominated for that was because I had stood up for someone online, because there was some racism happening online, and I stood up for that person. And they went in because they didn't know what I said or what had happened. They just knew that something had happened and I had taken a stand. And they went and nominated me for this award. And then that's actually why I ended up getting the nomination. And it was really powerful because this award comes out of the UK. It's all over the world. And for me, it was such an important piece because it just reminded me that when I took a stand, I could make impact. When I just stood for what I believed in. It's great to get recognition or whatever. But the fact that I was like, it's about going back to my values and how, as long as I stand in my values, I know that's when the change happens in the world. And that was like what the reward reminded me.
Your upbringing. You were brought up in Canada. Can you walk me through your upbringing? How were those days and how has Canada changed over the last few decades?
Yeah, so my parents had moved to Kamloops. I was born and raised in Kamloops, and my parents are amazing because my mom was pretty young. Like she was 19 when she had me and my dad was 30. And they blue collar family. Like my dad, they worked really hard at the railway. My mom focused on raising us, but it was like fun because my mom was like learning English at the same time. So, she'd always kind of ask us like, and we lived in a predominantly white area. And so a lot of our questions was like, oh, what are the other people eating? How they're dressed? What's going on? But also was like, it makes you think, oh, are we not good enough as we are? Because we have to be something else, right? So it ingrains that as a child. And now that's unraveled a little bit. And my brother played a lot of hockey and I played like hockey, soccer, like dance. Like my parents were very much about, let's get you and kids involved. So we were very fortunate that way. And one of the best things about our childhood was that we had Sunday evening, was our dinner time. We had Sunday evening game or like some family time. And we still do that. Sunday evenings is reserved for family. And it was such a powerful thing because it made you rest for the week, but also just have a connection time with each other where you could just watch TV or you could go play soccer in the field or whatever that was. And very fortunate because we had a lot of family around us as well. And I didn't it's funny because now I think because my parents were really strict. So I don't know if I had a lot of friends growing up and I thought I had them at school, but I don't know if I really had them outside. And then now I'm like very much about my friend circle. And it was really interesting because I was like, oh, I don't think I actually had a lot of friends growing up, but maybe I did. I don't know. So it's been interesting to think about that because apparently I was also, my cousins call me Bebe. Like I was the one who hung out with the adults. I was always telling people how to act in the world. Yes, apparently.
So question on that. What would you tell 20-year-old Manpreet based on everything you've learned about life?
I think the biggest thing is how Canada's changed. To answer your question about how Canada's changed, and I think what I would tell a 20-year-old is it's going to get better and we will have a place in the world. Growing up, there was a lot of not feeling enough, not feeling part of the community, not feeling a part of the culture. There was a lot of separation, I feel. And I feel like now, as thinking about Canada as a whole and back to the 20-year-old, that it does get better. We have our place in the world and we get to stand in it. And I think that's the biggest, lesson.
You are traveling all across the globe. How do you manage your day effectively? And what does your day look like?
So I still have a lot of free time, which people don't realize. I'm very, I get up at 5 a.m. So I do a lot of my meditation. I meditate for about an hour and a half in the mornings and work out in the mornings. I don't start my day until 10. So the morning's always for myself. And then it's been interesting over the last couple of years. I only work Monday to Thursday. Fridays is always off. Saturday and Sunday, I don't touch my computer. A lot of my work, I also I don't sleep a lot. So that's part of the reason how I get lots of things done. I'm always constantly thinking. But a lot of it is also, I always have support. Like when I know I can't do something, I'm very conscious I can't do it. And also now I've stopped taking on lots of extra.
Mentioned an hour and a half of meditation. I like to meditate, but nowhere close to an hour and a half. I do 20 minutes and I feel 20 minutes are great. What kind of meditation practice do you have?
Yeah, so hour and a half is not just pure. Okay. There's a couple of different guided meditations I do, and then some that are purely just about stillness. And then I do a lot of bhat as well, the prayers as well. So Sikh prayers. So I count that as part of the meditation.
If you could write anything on a billboard as a message for the entire country or world to see, what is your message going to be and why?
I think the message is just that we're more the same than we are different.
You mentioned a book already at the start of our conversation. Are there more books that come to your mind, ones that you would recommend for the listeners to go check out?
Yeah, I read a lot. What other books? But I think my most favorite book is Mitch Albom's Five People That We Meet in Heaven. No, Five People We Meet. Mitch Albom's book. All of his books are amazing, but that one's really good. And Paul Cleo's like The Alchemist was a game changer. But one of my favorite ones, the man of always, I'm really bad with titles, but Viktor Frankl's name, A Man of Meaning or Man of Meaning or something like that. Viktor Frankl. And his book was amazing. Like he wrote it when as soon as he came out of the concentration camps, and he talked about how your mind you need to really like reprogram your brain in order to not experience just what you're experiencing now, but remember what else is possible.
I love to read, so I'll check out all those books. I've already come across Alchemist, and I can vouch for that book as well. It's a lovely read. What is the best investment you have made in your life over the last decade, I would say? Could be anything. Could be money, could be investment in a course, resource.
I think the best investment was in Ayurveda, like learning about Ayurveda, the way of ancient Indian practices and that way of life. And I think that has been a game changer for me. It's changed my health. It's changed my well-being. It's just the consciousness around it and and how you relate to the world really shifted who I am in the world.
What can we expect from you over the next couple of years? Any exciting projects in the lineup?
I am writing a book around grief and leadership. I've been writing for a little while, so we'll hopefully finish it soon. I need to publish it. My publisher is wanting me to publish it soon. Other than that, I don't know. Like life's an oyster. And I think that's where I'm working on like the startup right now, which is really cool. We're looking at burnout in the healthcare industry. And we're doing some really great things in there. But I don't know, like there's so much possibility always. And I think it's a really exciting time for me because I think there's a lot of things that are going to transpire over the next little while.
I'm looking forward to you finishing that book because I definitely will be jumping on that. Manpreet, it's been a slice just chatting with you here today, just learning from you, from your stories. Thank you so much for sharing all that with myself and our listeners. Before I let you go though, any final words, any closing thoughts?
I think the biggest thing is like remembering that you are worth it, like for everyone. And I think that was like, we were talking about the women conversation. I think that was one of the things just to remembering is you are worthy. And that's a reminder that I think all of us sometimes need.
What a beautiful way to end the conversation, Manpreet. Thank you again for your time.